I'm pleased to say we have Matthew Griffin joining us again. Matthew is a CEO. He's a gentleman that lives in the future. He analyses the future and he helps people find their path to the future as organisations. So, Matthew, we're going to be talking about worldly insight and tips. So, give us some insight about how you see the world.
So, I think the one thing that people shouldn't believe is that the world isn't changing.
Okay.
I also don't think they should believe that it's changing slowly. We're at a pace now, basically, which is starting to scale exponentially. We're at a point now when you start lifting the lid off some of the emerging technologies that we have today and how some companies are using them and how they're impacting industries, we're now at the point where everything is changing. So you could fundamentally say that we're entering a new era. So everything that people think they know, put that to one side and start looking inside the box. So, for example, giving you an example, if we have a look at the macro view, if we take an industry by industry view of just how each industry on the planet is actually changing and being transformed by not just by technology, but by human innovation, we have, for example, the automotive industry. Over the past 7 years, we've seen the dramatic rise of autonomous vehicles, particularly autonomous cars. We know that. Those are here. When we have a look at things like the airline industry and the aviation industry, we're now on the brink of hypersonic passenger planes that are traveling at the edge of space. We have, in the agricultural industry, we are the only thing really that we're making extinct basically in the agricultural industry is the cattle and the livestock. We are now 3D printing lab-grown meat. In addition to that, we have vertical farms, which allow us to see how we can fundamentally replace farming as an industry itself. Mm-hmm. So again, on the communications side, we have space internet systems from the likes of SpaceX, Google and Facebook that will connect the other 3.5 billion people on the planet in the space of between 5 and 10 years. So these systems will beam 15 gigasecond internet down to every single point on Earth and disrupt the telecommunications industry in the process. We've got in the conservation arena, we're using robots to kill lionfish down in Florida. We are using 3D printers to print new corals, basically for the Great Barrier Reef. In the defense sector, we have fully autonomous defense platforms, whether those are drones, whether they are $4.5 billion battleships, whether they're minesweepers. We are already at the point where AIs have bested the best American Top Guns. Mm. And we're just at the start. Yeah. If we have a look at the education space, education, there's that question of today we have cookie cutter education. Does it prepare the students for what's coming in the future? Arguably not, particularly as the pace of change is so severe nowadays. But when we have a look at education, we're introducing virtual reality and augmented reality into education, mm-hmm. but we already have the technology to quite literally beam knowledge into people's heads. We've done that in the US with 30 volunteers where they managed to retain information from other people for 30 seconds. And 30 seconds doesn't necessarily seem a very long time, but they managed to retain information, whereas previously they wouldn't have been able to. When we have a look at the energy sector, we've got renewables like solar, for example. Solar is now the cheapest form of energy in 58 countries. We've got supercapacitors, which are allowing us to create new grid-scale storage systems. So we're seeing a revolution in that space. In the entertainment sector, when we have a look at actors, for example, we've already got artificial intelligence systems who are writing scripts, who are controlling camera drones, who are editing and putting different movies together. And if you have a look, for example, at Star Wars, we're bringing people back from the dead. So why do we need actors in the future? Why do we need backgrounds in the future? You can create everything almost nowadays virtually. Again, when we have a look at things like the financial services sector, we've got technologies like artificial intelligence and blockchain, which on the one hand will create a brand new sort of operating model for both of these sectors. But again, when we have a look at artificial intelligence being used in the financial services space, for example, you've got the likes of RBS who are actually capturing people's brainwaves during interviews. to try to use artificial intelligence to assess basically how their brain reacts to particular situations. We've got the rise of robo-advisors. In the insurance sector, we've got artificial intelligence that's already replacing claims adjusters and a whole variety of other people. So, we almost can see how the financial services sector, with the likes of companies like Bridgewater, who are a $160 billion hedge fund,
yep,
are trying to automate their entire company. Get rid of their entire executive team, their management teams, and so on and so forth. When we have a look at healthcare, for example, we look at ourselves today and we think, well, how are we going to compete with AI in the future? But we now have genetic technologies like CRISPR, which is a 3.5 billion year old technology, believe it or not, that allows us to edit genes on the fly. So we know which genes control intelligence. Last year, we created the first designer babies in Mexico. We have the capability to 3D print organs. So rather than in the future looking for an organ donor, you can just print out an organ. Whether that's a brain, whether it's a heart, whether it's a kidney, whether it's a piece of bone, whatever it happens to be, whether it's skin. We've got stem cell technology, which is allowing us to replace burns on people with their own skin, but without scarring. We've got regenerative medicine, basically, which is allowing us to quite literally grow back body parts rather than printing them out in that particular case. We've got nanotechnology that we've already released into people to release drugs. So we have a couple of examples where people have used brain waves to release drugs into specific parts of their body at specific times to control things like epilepsy. We've reversed blindness. We've reversed paralysis using carbon nanowires and stem cells. So, we're just lifting the lid off a little bit, basically, on healthcare there. When we have a look at things like manufacturing, we've got advanced manufacturing technologies like 3D and 4D printing. But similarly, we've got British Aerospace who want to use molecular assemblers to grow drones. So you grow a drone in a big vat. We've got companies in China who are, as well as the UAE, who are 3D printing buildings and skyscrapers. So manufacturing and construction is changing. In the retail space, we're using artificial intelligence to actually design brand new products and services. And then we're using 3D printing to personalize them and print them out. In the space sector, we are headed to Mars in the next couple of years. So we'll have colonies on Mars, arguably within the next 10 years. ESA, the European Space Agency, will be building a village on the moon starting this year. In the technology sector, basically, we've got artificial intelligence, blockchain, photonics, and we've got quantum computing. And if we sort of skip to quantum computing, quantum computers are 100 million times more powerful than today's logic-based computers. And those are coming. But similarly, when they're here, they'll also be able to crack at least 70% of all of the encryption on the planet. What does that do for your security? We've got artificial intelligence platforms now that are now starting to help us secure the internet against botnets. We've got artificial intelligence systems that are now the security systems, and they are replacing humans. We're talking about replacing the fabric of the internet itself with things like blockchain. So we can get rid of the sort of centralized architecture of the internet. Those things are happening. And then finally, when we have a look at the transport space, everything's going fully autonomous. We've got 500,000-ton cargo ships with Rolls-Royce. We've got canal boats in Amsterdam. We've got semi-trucks, basically with Otto, thanks to Uber, that are already delivering things in the US. So when we have a look at our own industries, we can see our own industries changing. But typically, a lot of people take a siloed view. When you start having a look externally, you suddenly realize that everything is changing. And when you realize the scale and the scope and the pace of change that's going on, not just in your own industry, but also in a lot of the other industries, which directly impact your own industry in most cases, it's very easy just to see how profound some of these changes are and how different things are going to be for our own children. And for example, by 2100, Generation Z, basically the people who are coming through now, the children who are coming through now, they could quite easily live beyond 100 years. So we're talking about fundamentally rewriting society, business, culture, all these different things. So what I would encourage people to do is actually, have a look outside of their own industry, have a look outside of their own personal, bubbles, and just see what is changing out there, because I think they'll be fascinated by it. On the one hand, slightly scared by it, but on the other hand, fascinated by it. And it's, the balancing act is, how do you juggle the two? How do you navigate your own career, for example, so you're not automated by an AI?
Right.
But then how do you get all the benefits that these things offer with none of the negatives?
Yeah, wonderful. Absolutely brilliant insight, Matthew. So for anybody watching this, you can pick up even more of that kind of insight and delve in even further and meet the celebrity that is Matthew Griffin at Business Rocks. So otherwise, thank you very much for sharing all, Matthew. It was really good.
Yeah, thank you, Marty.